Today we're making a portfolio with ties and flaps. This has inset ribbons, and inside there are 3 flaps that overlap like this to protect the artwork. This one is a quarter bound, and we'll be making one that is half bound. The half bound portfolio differs in that it has cloth covered corners as well as the spine. We're at the board shear, and I'm going to square up my board first before I make any cuts for the portfolio. And the portfolio, like any case that we're going to be making, the grain should always be running parallel to the spine. This portfolio is going to be for a tabloid-sized paper, and the way we measure this, since there's going to be flaps in it, is that we put the paper and the portfolio board up against the stop on the board shear and leave about 3/8 of an inch all the way around on the head, the foredge, and the tail of the portfolio board. So I'm going to take this out now and make my first cut. And I'll make another set so I can make 2 portfolios as we go along. Now, since this is the height, the next thing we have to cut is the lining paper for the flaps. And we want this to be the same height as the board because we're going to trim it down, and it should be 19 inches wide. This one is just about 19 inches wide here because I pre-cut it, and the grain is running parallel to this edge here. We're going to cut 3 flaps out of this, and we want the grain to be running parallel to all of our folds in the flaps. So since this gauge is set to the board height, I'll cut 1 paper length here for the lining, and then I'll do that for the second portfolio as well. Now we'll make our second cut. For the foredge to spine measurement. And I'll tape the gauge here because I have to make four cuts. Now we're also going to cut a gauge, and the gauge is for the space between the boards when we make the case. So in figuring this out, because there are flaps inside, we take the intended measurement of the material we want to put into the portfolio, which in this case is about 3/8 of an inch, and then I add a 1/4 inch for each board. So that'll make this adding a 1/2 inch to that, so that makes that 7/8 of an inch wide. So I'll set my gauge here to 7/8 and then cut. This seems like a lot of space, but the flap does have thickness both on the top and the bottom, so we need to have enough room for that, plus the turning of the boards inside the portfolio. Okay, we're ready to put the case together. I have my boards here now, and I have the lining paper for the flaps. The first thing we're going to do before we put the case together is cut the fabric and laminate this so that it has time to dry while we finish making the case. I'm going to be using canapetta, and canapetta is a fabric that has a slight visual grain to it. I like the grain to wrap around the spine and also wrap around the folds. So I have to be careful, and I can see here that the grain is going this way. So I'll take my paper, which is 19 inches from here to here, because that's the height of the board. And all of the folds are going to be running parallel to this side. So in order to have the grain wrap around, the grain has to go this way, which it does here. So I'm going to take my knife and cut this fabric just slightly larger than the piece of paper. And we'll save this piece to cut the corners from a little later. Okay. I'll turn the fabric over, and I have little weights to keep it from curling. But I'll let this curl like this for the moment so that I can glue it out, glue out the paper. In order to keep this from separating, I'll just put a little bit of glue there and overlap this paper just a little bit. Okay, we're all glued out now. I'm going to lift the paper here and put it aside. Do this. And then lay out my fabric. And the fabric is larger so that I can take this large piece of glued paper and I don't have to worry about matching edges. So I'll lay this in place and I'll turn it over and use my roller to laminate these pieces together. Now I'll set this aside so that it can dry while we're working on the case. If you're doing a number of these, it's good to put them paper to paper, cloth to cloth, and just stack them up under a board and let them dry. Okay, now for the boards and doing a half binding, we're going to take our dividers and find out what a quarter of the board's width is. So I'll take the dividers and just flip these over. That is already not quite a quarter. Four. Okay, I'm going to keep this a little bit smaller because this is a rather large portfolio. And basically, the quarter binding is more important to have it actually a quarter when it is a small book because it takes up a large portion of the spine. On the portfolios, we just need it so that you can have it cover where your fingers are going to go so you don't have wear onto the decorative papers that you're using. So I'm going to use this slightly less than a quarter because we're going to cover part of this up with the paper anyway, and just give this a little bit of a mark here. Okay, that's fine. And I'll mark this at the head and the tail. I'm also going to mark one space right here very much on the end. And this is for the half-bound corners. Now, since I'm doing a lot of portfolios, I'm going to take my triangle and set this in place. And then on the back side of the triangle, keeping this in place, I'm going to put just a little masking tape stop. And what this will do is give me an automatic measure on the triangle so that I can fit the corners exactly each time and mark them off. But I won't do that until after I have the spine, on the book. While you're laminating the pieces for your portfolios, you can actually use the fabric as a ground on which to do your gluing out. All you have to do is turn it into a portrait format, and with the roller, start out in the center of the sheet. This takes a lot of glue because it's a big sheet. And then just carefully roll the edges till you get all of the surface coated with glue. This way, if you're using the actual covering material, which is the binding cloth, you don't have to have any waste paper underneath. Just a little bit more on the corner here. Okay. So then, turn this into a landscape, and you can turn it over and just use your glue marks as a guide for putting the paper down. And with your hands, rub the edges, then turn it over onto your clean table and use the roller to make sure all of the fabric is attached very cleanly. And then I'll just take this over, put it on a stack. And pick up the next piece. This one is a little bit tighter because I was running a little bit close with the fabric. But we'll make it work. Got a little bit of glue on the table here, but that's okay. Wipe it up. And now I'll just turn the paper over. And line it up here. Light rub down, and then using the roller to make good contact here. There we are.